the denial phase, how Canadians are, even in Alberta statehood movement, Canada the 51st state. I've tagged Jonathan and Benjamin. I'm going to take a step back this weekend. We're going to move the space to the following Sunday on X for part 5 of our videos, which I agree with too. I'm going to enjoy my weekend with my kids and really download away from the massive denial of Canadians, even the Patriots in Canada. You see it. Benjamin's been tagging me in some bigger posts in Canada or Alberta statehood movement of just the sheer denial and comments of Albertans, what Americans are saying, where Americans are. We're clearly a mass majority of Canadians, especially Albertans, Saskatchewanians, are not. And that begins with denial of our crown system, our constitutional monarchy, that Americans had a war of independence against for all the same reasons, the things that Donald J. Trump is doing to us today in Canada, that's going to rapidly expand in sanctions and trade embargoes. This isn't going anywhere. It's only going to get worse, and we're likely not to get a trade deal with the USA that doesn't include absolutely 100% of our products to the United States. Why is that, everybody? Well, it's very simple. We're a direct competitor with the United States, and we're working with all the countries in spheres of influence that wish to bring United States down. If you don't know, all your LNG is earmarked for only China. That is the only place all LNG Canada is going these days. Not to USA, not to the European Union. If you doubt that, please look at carbon pricing schemes Canada, carbon pricing schemes Alberta, that have been around since Paris Climate, absolutely Stephen Harper, all the way against one Premier, Ralph Klein, who said no. He wanted to entirely follow the American model. For those who don't know, Ralph Klein's legacy was expanding our resources to the United States of America at an unprecedented rate Alberta's never, ever seen in its history. A massive shift and transfer of those resources to the United States. Best deal we could get. Massive prosperity. I lived through it, so did many Albertans. But your greedy, seedy politicians, it was not enough. It began with Stephen Harper. He expanded the equalization formula. He did that. A conservative who, in history, back following equalization, it was the Conservatives who implemented that. The Conservatives created it. Supersized socialism for all of Canada. That's who created it. Liberals have expanded on it. They've tweaked the formula here and there, but barely touched it. Harper was the last to change the formula. Trudeau did not. Harper wrote it, taking a tremendous amount from Alberta, forcing Alberta to transition to new markets, ever increasing our resources out of, yes, Alberta and the rest of Canada, to China, who in its sphere of influence has 3 billion people under their wing, their branch, in a second world status, not a first world status. It's communist. And their best friends are full-on military dictatorships or severe civil law socialists. Nothing comparable to Canada. That's where our oil is going from Trans Mountain. 100%. You have to come to terms with that. That it wasn't enough to have access to the American market and strengthen America. It wasn't enough prosperity for your greedy, seedy government. You can conservative, liberal alike. In fact, conservatives are instrumental in this. They created it. NDP and liberals jumped on it through the Trudeau transition. They have earmarked even more. All of your natural gas to LNG via BC is earmarked entirely for communist China. You do that. More than that is your gold. All your reserves were sold primarily to two countries, India and China. You've also, at a record pace, mined more gold than ever in Canadian history over this last period from 2008 to now 2025. In that time, you've sold mining gold through London, Bank of Canada, Mark Carney, to Bank of Canada, London, England, Mark Carney, who set it all up via Prime Minister Stephen Harper and then Justin Trudeau. And you have sold Canadians over 2,400 tons of gold. 400 has gone to India. 2,000 tons has gone to communist China in those periods. You have to get a handle on the truth of what is and what's reality. I get it. People are in denial. You're lying. You're a piece of shit. You're NDP. You're a libtard. I am none of those things. I've never been published to being any of those things. The closest thing I've always related to in publication, clear publication, is an American Republican of we the people and constitutional rule of law of we the people. I've maintained that for a minimum of 10 years in clear publication, clear truth, standing on my own 2 feet against a massive Canadian majority. And today, and over the course of these last weeks, I highlight the truth of the blinders of Canadians, that you have constructed a war on America. You are deadly against the security of the United States of America. You're leading the charge to strengthening China. You're doing this through your natural resources, absolutely your financial system, and absolutely all non-renewables, which is energy to drive the expansion of the Chinese military to overtake the United States of America, giving them energy independence at absolutely the expense of every Canadian generation to come, meaning this is the last living generation that will enjoy our non-renewable resources. The years of 300 years are gone. That was gone when we did the transition into the United States. We were left with 97 to a best case scenario 109 years. And when we're talking about that, we're talking about recoverable, cost-effective natural resources. Sure, there's lots of oil in Canada, but how much is economically recoverable where you can afford to bring that to market as gasoline or products? The answer is actually a very little. And when you add all those together, we have less in the idea of a Northern Gateway pipeline that is not to Europe. If you don't know carbon pricing, you don't know the European system, your oil from Alberta and Canada is not going to Europe. Not unless you want to liquidate all of your revenue, meaning nobody can afford to produce, meaning you're losing money sending it there. You might as well put it on a boat for free and pay for it. You've seen this over and over in market decline. You've seen it so many times, especially Albertans in your lifetime. Do you think you can afford an EU demand of $150 a CO2 ton of emission? Do you think you can afford that? Obviously you can't. And anyone who hasn't done that math or that work, I don't know what to tell you. You're silly, you're incompetent, you're living in a bubble of CBC. You are equivalent to CBC, according to Americans. And if you don't know why Trump is smashing Canada harder than anybody else in the world, and really doing it at a very nice rate and pace, because I promise you, November 2026, in a USMCA comparable to China, to Japan and European Union's trade deal, you're bankrupt, Canada. You're not going to exist anymore. You're going to be begging the United States for statehood. You're going to transition rapidly post that date to second or third world status. Anyone telling you otherwise is an idiot, a buffoon, doesn't know history, doesn't know reality. These same economic conditions were put on the 13 colonies by the British Empire. What do you think the Tea Party was about? What do you think all the imposed ordinances on taxes was about? They were massive tariffs on the 13 colonies to ruin them. And they fought the War of Independence. Now, you could say we're going to fight the War of Independence against the United States and we're going to amalgamate with China. Well, you've already been doing that since absolutely undeniably 2008. In writing, cemented in 2011. This is not under Justin Trudeau. This is under Stephen Harper. If you don't know, USA does not have any of these scams in place. It's right now fighting the European Union that you're trying to lockstep with to rob all other Canadians of everything they're ever going to have, basically giving away our resources for nothing. In fact, even paying for them out of the ground. The amount of midget intelligence across Canada is stifling. And I'm sorry to have to say that, but Donald J. Trump didn't start this war. Canadians did. It started with the Conservatives, and yes, the Bank of Canada Governor, Mark Carney, made by Stephen Harper, who existed for over 7 years as a loyal Canadian Conservative, then transitioned to Boris Johnson in the UK as the Bank of England Governor, Conservative for the next 8, and then he went back to the Liberals because that's how he was going to get PM office right here in Canada, and he did. You all voted for him. You voted for Agenda 2050. It's absolutely part and parcel of everything that's Danielle Smith. She's published it many times. Binders on, Albertans cheer, fists in the air, Saskatchewanians do too. Agenda 2050 is the complete consumption of all of Canada's natural resources in one generation for the entire world. Most of the undemocratic world, all the BRICS nations, that's what you're transitioning into. When all the LNG projects are online, you have 16 and a half years of natural gas left. Fact, not fiction. Go do the math. That's what we're going to do. If you've never watched documentaries in the United States of directional drilling, sucking all of the zones out of one community because they wouldn't sign or wouldn't go along, that's basically what's happening in Canada for the entire undemocratic world. Communists and dictators. That's what Canada says it needs, its crown needs to survive and prosper. And you know what USA says? How come all of you countries, like let's look at Canada, the USA, who outperforms USA in energy, but yet has no material prosperity to show. This was the same for Argentina. This was the same for African republics in history, that just in resources alone, those regimes, Venezuela, there was no reason for any of these economies not to be even more prosperous than the United States for all their citizens. But as Benjamin Ebley and many Americans will tell you, across both Democrat and Republican aisles, prosperity comes from life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It comes from first and foremost cementing those basic rights of the people, which do not exist in Venezuela, do not exist in Argentina, and certainly don't exist in Canada. And it's why it's never enough, because you have no real rights. You transfer all of that authority and power over you, the individual, you, the family unit, to your government, who gets to do whatever they want for all the years they're in power, under no term limits. That's another thing they all have in common. No term limits. They get used to the stealing. They come up with great schemes over many decades, passing it along to the next set of thieves and rapists, perfecting their systems, stealing more and more until the people are in absolute poverty. This is where Canada's going. And I get it. People are waking up today in the denial phase. Just in Alberta, Statehood movement, and Canada, the 51st state page, still in denial, wanting to fight the truth. It's not true, it's a lie. It's not a lie. And again, the United States knows this truth since 2018 under their G7 China radar. They're tracking you, Canada. Trump is imposing all these things since you started your war on America, since you started the transition to China, not USA. You abandoned your best friend for your greedy, seedy, thieving crown politicians who are overabundant government size beyond all human measure. There is no Democrat State of the Union that compare in government bloat to anything of any conservative or liberal or NDP or Bloc, Green province of Canada, whatever you want to call it. There is no comparable model of an American state that comes even remotely close to the best conservative province of Canada in extreme government inefficiency, corruption, and bloat. Your entire chartered banking systems are being thrown out of the United States since prosecutions and convictions since 2020. Hundreds of branches closed, many hundreds of millions of dollars in fines that you taxpayers are responsible for. Why is that happening? Is it because USA's the bad guy, or your crown system is completely corrupt and morally bankrupt, as it's always been, and we're conditioned and institutionalized to accept it as the only model we know? It must be accurate. We're raised to hate America. America bad, Canada good. Now we're even being taught China good, America bad. That is the moral majority of Canadians today. This wasn't the case 11 years ago. It was completely opposite. You've been easily bamboozled and conditioned from state media and government propaganda to, in 11 years' time, view China as your best buddy from being a direct threat to your country. And there's propaganda. They say, oh, China did this, we're going to investigate. But you know, so nothing ever comes from those investigations. And in the end, the conservatives don't rat the liberals. Liberals don't rat conservatives because they don't want to be held accountable, because there is no accountability. And really, these are crimes against humanity, crimes against the Canadian people. And the only reason why I target conservatives and liberals is because they are the only parties who've held the reins of power in the federal level in Canada. That's why I do it. Not because I have a love of NDP. Now you can clearly find many, many posts of mine going back how I dealt with NDP when they were in power over me in my province. Clearly I don't support NDP. I have many viral posts highlighting their corruption and evil. But it's the same corruption and evil at its core that infects all parties. And denying it, lying to yourselves and your families, while the Conservatives wage a major war against America that's going to see us destroyed by the United States of America. And I promise you, Donald J. Trump come and go, these tariffs, these schedules, these trade embargoes, these sanctions will not leave with the Democrats. They will not leave. They will accept and adopt those solutions and keep it going forevermore. If you doubt that, again, look at all the tariff schedules Trump put in 2017 till today, or till 2020, and look what Joe Biden did with all of them. None of them were removed. In fact, their government, their administration, kept on with all the prosecutions of all your Canadian chartered banks in all the financial districts of the United States, Democrat, Republican alike. Spans many, many states, 5 overlapping financial districts, hundreds of Canadian chartered bank branches prosecuted over the course of the Democrats in office. And then they were convicted at the end of 2024. Trump didn't assume office till January 2025, folks. It was Joe Biden's government. Those convictions happened under Joe Biden, off of what Trump brought forward post 2018 while he was in office. They continue on. They continue the last work of the last presidency, no matter what rhetoric and slamming they do against each other. They continue things that make America great and protect America, because that's their number one mandate. And that much they absolutely do agree on and do work at. That's my video, folks. I hope so many patriots, 51st staters from multiple geographics start to wake up to this, because everything I share is the absolute truth. Not sugar-coated, not lies, absolute truth. Trans Mountain, all for China, not USA, not European Union, China and their Asian sphere of influence. End of story. Anyone telling you anything otherwise is a liar. This includes all LNG, the nation-building projects. I've gone through it. China nation-building projects. G7 Chinese radar shows clearly you Canadians, you conservative provinces in the Horn of Plenty. This is Alberta, BC, Saskatchewan. You in mass majority are financing the China nation building. Not China investing in you, Canada, building China into Canada. It's you investing in China and then instituting all those things in Canada. You're paying for your government to do that, not Xi Jinping. He isn't putting hardly any money. His money is going into USA and everybody else in the G7, not you, Canada. He doesn't have to. You're doing it all for him. That's the truth. What do you think USA thinks about us today? Why do you think we're under tremendous tariffs? Why do you think USA's cutting us down? You can thank all your governments and start with the Conservatives. Start with opening your eyeballs. Start with accepting this truth. Because literally you're robbing every Canadian generation after this current one of everything they're ever going to have and any energy, security, and independence that we enjoy today. You're removing that forevermore from every Canadian generation after mine. That's what you're doing, which means my children, my grandchildren, all of your children, all of your grandchildren, just to destroy America and see China as the world power so that your crown can float CAD under their currency. If you ever doubt this, It's been published all through Stephen Harper and Justin Trudeau's government times. Absolutely. And you'll find it in London, England too. Under who? Mark Carney, the architect. The conservative lifetime member, now lifetime liberal member. Another flip-flopper. Like who? Oh yeah, Premier Danielle Smith in Alberta today. These are truths people need to come to terms with, because USA's come to terms with it since 2018, and they're going to destroy you. That's my video. Share, share, share. Get it out there. Let people bawl and baby in their soup. It's part of the process. First they laugh at you, then they criticize you, then they turn around, assassinate your character, run you down. Then there's the denial phase, and then there's acceptance. I hope that phase comes quicker than a year from now, because we're doomed. We're epically doomed after that. It is a forever second to maybe third world status, forevermore. And that kind of action is permanent. This isn't a pandemic or a 2008-9 financial crisis. This is not only annual, it's for the foreseeable future. If you don't change where you're going and what your government's doing against you and against the United States of America. God bless. That's my video. Enjoy your day. Bye now.